So during the golden era of newborn and then adolescent papyrology, when a great deal of exquisite texts emerged, and papyrology scarcely had time to engage with and assimilate these discoveries, there was a necessity-driven focus on the text. The materiality and form of the documentary papyri under study did not receive the full attention they deserved, with a few notable exceptions. You see Ulrich Wilken on the screen. As for paleography, it was long relegated to an auxiliary role in aiding dating at the expense of a stylistic and functional analysis, a tradition that unfortunately continues. Experts in literary papyri were quicker to acknowledge the formal aspects of the manuscripts they were working on, keenly aware that they preserved original works from antiquity and facilitated the reconstruction of ancient book production methods. Studying literary scripts led to analysis that went beyond merely dating these writings. Instead, these studies categorized them into distinct styles and correlated them with the textual content. Here again, we observe the detrimental effects of dividing papyrology into two fields, each with its distinct methodologies. I've long advocated for a unified approach to papyrology that accords significant emphasis to the formal aspects of a written text. Indeed, why should we not extend the same attention to form in documentary text as we do to literary texts? I sought to demonstrate this in my presentation in the 2004 Congress of Papyrology. Oh my dear, it's a long time. Introducing an approach I called paleographie signifiante, a somewhat challenging term to translate into English. In doing so, I ascribe to paleography a meaning that transcends the study of script alone, encompassing more broadly the modalities of textual inscription, writing, format, layout. Paleographie signifiante does not merely describe formal phenomena, but always strives to discern how these phenomena reveal something beyond the form. This could be the meaning of the text, the nature and purpose of the document, the context of its composition, the personality of its author, and on a macro-cultural level, the system of conventions governing the act of writing. It contributes to the history of written culture, and in doing so, the world of documentary text must not be neglected, of course. So this approach benefits from the burgeoning studies on the materiality of ancient writing, which over the past decade have experienced a significant surge. These studies increasingly reinforce the idea that one can't understand fully a text if one doesn't consider its materiality and the material conditions of its production. So consequently, in the realm of papyrology, before a papyrus is interpreted as a text, it first presents itself as an object. But its formal characteristic needs to be deciphered and interpreted. So I would go so far as to say that a papyrologist who overlooks these aspects not only does half the job, but also risks missing crucial data or even misinterpreting the text. And today I aim to demonstrate the methods and implications of this approach by examining the papyrus from four perspectives: the material, the format, layout, and script. So first, the material. So it's the first aspect a papyrologist encounters. The various writing materials the ancient scribes had at their disposal were not interchangeable. Their use was dictated by different reasons. While papyrus, as you know, was the most universal medium, and as such its use is less distinctive, the employment of other materials, ceramic, wood, parchment, leather, etc., can be explained by the documentary genre or origin, or result from specific writing conditions that should not be overlooked. So this point for this is sufficiently well known for me to dwell on them here. So I will therefore skip this part and move to my second point, the format. The format, yes. So in antiquity, a scribe using papyrus faced additional format choices. Should he write on a scroll or a segment thereof, or on a codex? So this question arises especially during the period when both formats coexisted. The choices made are far from random. With the emergence of the codex as a documentary medium in the second quarter of the 5th century, scrolls and codices initially found themselves in competition for the transcription of long texts. Even though, as in the literary domain, but with a delay, the codex increasingly gained prominence, almost entirely supplanting the scroll by the 8th century, facilitated by Romanization, particularly with the acceleration brought by Diocletian's reforms. The codex was adopted in official spheres. It quickly became the normative medium for public, financial, and fiscal documents from village and municipal administrations, such as land registers or tax rolls, even though there were persistent exceptions demonstrating some reluctance to adopt this form, like this 6th century cadaster. In the private sphere, the use of rolls for extensive account persisted longer. Papyrologists have also another issue. As to face another issue. Does the fragment they are working on originate from a scroll or codex book, or is it from an isolated document written on a single sheet? So apart from land registers, fiscal and accounting books, and archival records that filled entire scrolls or custom-made codices, an ancient scribe, when drafting a document, typically used only a segment of a scroll, its length varying with the text size, of course. What we refer to as a sheet or a coupon in French. In Greek, it's the cartion or cartarion. However, since certain documents could be subject to public or private archiving, the question arises whether we are dealing with an isolated document, whether an original or a private copy, or an excerpt from archival registers. So I encountered this issue nearly 20 years ago while editing a tax receipt from Strasbourg, which I suspected belonged to the archive of Dioscorus of Aphrodite. I will say Aphrodite and not Aphrodito, as Isabel did. The text is complete, showing nothing before or after, and the verso is blank. This suggests an original receipt. Yet, it's not the case. The taxpayer named in the receipt, Cornelius, son of Philantinos, is known from a series of identical receipts copied one after another in the blank pages of two old tax registers of the village of Aphrodite. One of them even includes a receipt in handwriting identical to the Strasbourg Papyrus, as you can see on the screen. In fact, our receipt belongs to a third codex, a third register whose fragmentary folios are preserved in the Strasbourg collection. Thus, it's not an original document, but a fragmentary folio of a private register whose recto was left blank. So by identifying this fragment as a part of a larger collection, we not only augment an already known series, but also give its additional significance, additional significance beyond the mundane content of the text. There emerges an intent, that of archiving for certain purposes which are not known or clearly known. In fact, analyzing these series of receipts allows us to date them, a task impossible with an isolated receipt in the absence of an absolute date, and sheds light on the relationships, familial in this case, that connected the various taxpayers, a connection no other document in this archive could have revealed. So this leads to an enhanced overall understanding of this archive. So in the case of the Strasbourg Papyrus, a critical clue for understanding that we were dealing with a copy in a codex rather than an original on a sheet, was the text orientation. It was written along, it is written along the fibers, which is not the usual arrangement for original receipt type documents of that era. The text's orientation relative to the fibers, and thus its layout, is indeed a crucial element in discerning a text nature. Considering that the recto of a papyrus roll as horizontal fibers, the scribe has the option of positioning the sheet either to write the text along the fibers or across the fibers, transversa carta, with the sheet turned 90 degrees. So this choice was not random, but was influenced by the document's genre or the function of the version the scribe was to write. The relationship between text and fiber orientation must be considered according to a diachronic approach. First, the graphical layout of a document on a papyrus sheet has evolved, and these developments must be understood for a full appreciation of the text. Let us take the case of a letter, of the letter. During the Ptolemaic period, it had two layouts, written either along the fibers on vertical format sheets or against or across the fibers on horizontal format sheets. In the Roman era, the former was favored, and in the Byzantine period, the latter. So I have shown some 15 years ago that this revolution, and in the etymological sense of the word, in the letter's layout was due to a change in its diplomatic characteristics, disappearance of the prescript and of the final salutation formula, conditioned by a new form of epistolary sociability developing in late antiquity. Thus, the change in layout is a micro phenomenon indicative of a macro phenomenon in the history of mentalities. Synchronic analysis of the layout is equally crucial. At the same period, presentation modes could differ from one genre to another, according to systems of opposition that we must interpret. First, grasp and then interpret. Returning to the case of the letter, how to explain the coexistence in the Ptolemaic period of two opposite layouts? Studying the abundant archive of Zenon, 3rd century BC, it was observed that the former, what you have on the left, on the right, sorry, more suited to the large formal script of central offices, often emanated from the administration or significant figures, mimicked in letters sent to them. And the latter, what you have on the left, was perceived as much less formal. So jumping a few centuries and changing genre. Between the 5th and the 6th century, the 7th century, nearly 87% of the petitions are written along the fibers, while the rest is written across the fibers, transversa carta. Thus, at a time when the transversa carta layout was becoming standard for other documents, the opposite layout was used for petitions, too prevalent to be anything but a norm. It's not a coincidence from a layout perspective if the Byzantine petition contrasts with the letter, which was then written transversa carta. This contrast might reflect a difference in nature and procedure between these two modes of contact between the governed and the authorities. Letters were sent while petitions were delivered in person, suggesting that letter writing to authorities was a privilege reserved for a select few. Alternatively, the petition addressing high officials might adopt the traditional format of administrative acts, which long favored writing along the fibers and continue to do so out of archaism in an era when private acts were increasingly written across the fibers. Regardless of interpretation, the papyrologist must be mindful of these systems of opposition, which can aid in classifying the genre of fragmented or unclear documents. To offer just an example, this papyrus that you have on the screen, a 6th century papyrus, missing its initial part, was published by its editor as a petition. However, the fact that it is written across the fibers should have raised doubts. These suspicions are confirmed by the final formula, typically epistolary. We are indeed dealing with a letter and not a petition. Deviations were not resulting from an editor's misinterpretations are often explainable. For instance, due to the scribe's ignorance of prevailing norms, significant for assessing his cultural profile, or because of a secondary use of the text, a document, for instance, copied into an archive register or a didactic or practical anthology like this roll, which compiles a petition and 5 letters serving as models, letters whose original were certainly written across the fibers and not along the fibers as they are here on the roll. This is important for accurately defining the text actual function. There are also instances of drafts which may not necessarily observe the standard presentation norms as this draft of petition that is written across the fibers. So the final element a papyrologist confronts when studying a papyrus is, of course, the script. The script too carries valuable clues, not just about the document's era, but also its geographic origin, the nature of the text, and the scribe's profile. So, geographic origin. While the homogeneity of scripts across various periods, despite diverse origins of papyri, is what mainly strikes the paleographer, geographic peculiarities are certainly present. Comparing Egypt with other Hellenophone kingdoms or provinces is challenging due to the vast discrepancy in documentary volume. However, studies of papyri written outside Egypt have identified specific characteristics in the scripts from, for instance, from the Dead Sea documents, with a certain rigidity of strokes, with, among other features, an alpha whose bowl dives far below the line, as you can see on this picture. Also, the papyri from the Middle Euphrates, Dura Europos, Apadana, show modern traits in their scripts by the mid-3rd century, anticipating those found in Egyptian documentation of the following century, and the form of the heta, for instance, of the kappa, in a quadrilinear system. I have demonstrated some years ago that the left bold alpha, derived from Latin script, was a hallmark betraying a Constantinopolitan origin. This was evident for me while studying draft imperial rescripts in duplicate composed by Dioscorus of Aphrodite during legal proceedings in Constantinople. And at this period, the petitioner had to submit a draft of the imperial rescript with his petition in order to relieve the administration. It's strange, but it was so. I realized that the version in Dioscorus' hand was each time submitted to a Constantinopolitan who copied and improved it. The provincial was, Dioscorus was apprehensive about presenting the emperor with a text not conforming to the imperial chancellery norms, and had his copy revised by a local expert. So this entire scenario was unveiled through this paleographic detail. Even within a province like Egypt, one can discern graphic particularisms by regions. An experienced papyrologist can sense whether a text comes from, say, Fayum, Middle Egypt, or Thebes. Its instinct is more a product of experience than scientifically proven observations. Nonetheless, one has been able to identify the typical script of the Heracleopolite gnome from the 4th, 5th centuries, featuring alphas dipping below the line. Another one, characteristic of the accounts office, the Logisterion of Hermopolis in the 6th and 7th centuries. And a third one, typical of the Alexandrian notary in the 6th century. So these findings support the existence of graphic schools specific to the administrations of metropolises and provincial capitals. They have also allowed for the assigning of origins to papyri whose provenance was unknown, an approach that could be systematized with more thorough study of these schools. At any given time, multiple writing styles were in use. So this diversity not only reflects the idiosyncrasies of scribes, it is also explained by the nature of the text. We can refer to this as functional differentiations. Each period developed its modalities of differentiation, often functioning by contrast. These graphical differentiations may occur within the same document, particularly in the Byzantine and Arab periods. Here are some of the more frequent examples across various documentary genres. In letters, for instance, the style of the letter body contrasts with that of the endorsement written in a very stylized manner. This style derives from the ancient Roman chancery script, exaggerating its tendencies. It was perceived as particularly ceremonial and ostentatious, thus adopted for the part of the letter visible when closed and sealed, displaying the recipient's name. The adoption of this style graphically translates the respect due to the recipient. In notarial documents, the notary often writes their his completio, and his signature, his inscription at the end of the document, in a style distinguishing it from the rest of the deed, using graphical contrast that can vary according to notarial schools, body in sloping script and completio in upright script, as you have here on the screen, or vice versa. In notarial documents from the Heracleopolite, Arsinoite, and Oxyrhynchite gnomes, a contrast is observed between the protocol and the opening of the document with the Christian invocation, the date, and the place, written in sloping script, and the document body in upright script. In petitions, stylistic opposition may occur between the recipient's name, what we call inscriptio, at the start, in the upright and stretch script similar to the letter endorsements, and the rest of the document in sloping script. It can even be more complex, using 3 levels: the inscriptio in endorsement type script, the petitioner's name or intitulatio in upright cursive, and the body of the petition in a sloping script. So these stylistic plays aim to highlight the authority's name being addressed, adopting a script imbued with solemnity. They are part of what could be termed graphical rhetoric, mirroring the rhetorical dimension of the content, especially in exalting the recipient in the preamble of the petition. Last example with administrative notifications, ordinances, payment orders, etc. which develop a stylistic contrast between the notification body, sloping cursive, and the counting or gnosis section, written in upright cursive, replaced by minuscule in the Arab period. This indicates that a single person could adopt various writing styles depending on the nature of the document he was writing. We have to distinguish between hand and style. While two individuals are differentiated by their hands, the same hand can express itself in various styles. For instance, we know from the various documents Dioscorus of Aphrodite left behind that he had multiple styles. You can see 3 of them on the screen. Here, the system of stylistic differentiation is taken to the extreme. It's likely that this was more common than we think. This versatility speaks volumes about the cultural profile of the scribe.
Is the limit of time, so I don't know if you could conclude, Professor Fournet?
Yes, I have 3 minutes. It's okay?
If you have a minute, so okay.
Sorry?
We go.
So, the profile of the scribe, I will skip, I will just show you some example with the use of literary scripts at this one, and also the use of diacritic signs like spirit, accents, punctuation signs, which are employed by by person having a good education and a good literary culture. So, as you've seen, the formal characteristic of a papyrus yield a wealth of diverse information that complements or corrects that provided by the text. They illuminate the nature of the document, which is damaged, which its damaged text may not always reveal, its actual function, which may not always be deduced from the text, the conditions under which it was written, and the profile of its writer not explicitly revealed by the text itself. Thus, the format analysis is of a written piece proves to be an informative goldmine. However, it requires a sensitivity to discern and interpret the clues presented by the papyrus as an object. It also necessitates that papyrologists more systematically explore the many yet barely charted paths, validating the relevance of certain criteria and identifying new ones through the serial examination of many documents. This is a field with much room for growth, where digital tools, especially artificial intelligence, as Isabelle showed before, will be crucial in objectifying certain indicators that we currently struggle to grasp and organize into meaningful series. Thank you.